My name is Andrew Eason. I am the Wounded Healers Program Director for City Vision University. We are a 100% online nonprofit university based out of Kansas City, the Missouri side. We focus on basically 4 degrees. Our core values are Jesus, justice, and technology, and we focus on supporting rescue missions so that they can support the clients that come to them, residents, students, and whatever version that is. As the Wounded Healers Program Director, it's kind of personal to me. So a side note is I struggled with addiction for 25 years. I grew up in a town just south of here, Coleman, went off to college, started getting in trouble, kind of moved, bounced around for about 25 years. I finally gotten enough. Well, I hadn't been in trouble in quite a while, but life got pretty bad. So 2017, I went through a residential recovery program in Southwest Florida called Justin's Place. It's a part of St. Matthew's House in Naples. I got close to graduating. I decided I was going to stick around and not go back into my trade. At that point, I was a captain. I took care of yachts and boats and fish and stuff like that. But I felt called, so I answered that call, stepped into an internship. Then I got a job as a case manager, and in early 2019, I enrolled in City Vision. So got all of my old transcripts together, sent them to City Vision. December 2019, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in addiction counseling and went straight into the MBA program. So early 2022, I got my MBA, and in that time, I went from the case manager to a senior case manager to a program manager. Then I took over intake for a while, and then I managed the first phase of the program and eventually became the director of the men's program in Naples for St. Matthew's House. So not only am I the Wounded Healers Program Director, but I am a wounded healer. So the calling that I have on my life is to do basically what I do now, hopefully with City Vision for a long time. But regardless, that's what I'm called to do. I'm going to skip over to one little slide here and kind of give a definition. So the Wounded Healers name came from a quote by Henry Nouwen, right? So nobody escapes being wounded. We are all wounded people, whether physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. The main question isn't how can we hide our wounds so we don't have to be embarrassed, but more along the lines is how can we put our wounds in the service of others. So once my wounds become a source of healing, I become a wounded healer and I can help others. So the wonderful part about that, if you go back to last night, so when I get stuck in that physical spot of that attitude or that emotion, right, whether it's joy or fear, right, because I want to return to joy. If I'm stuck in fear, if I'm stuck in anger, each one of those emotions that I get stuck with, I need to know how to get to joy from there, right? So the part of being a wounded healer and the part of a lot of what we do at rescue missions is identifying where people are, meeting them there, and bringing them from that point of irritable, discontent, restlessness. William White would call it a period of isolation and discontentment. And we take them from there, we introduce them to hope, right? We walk them along the path until that hope is not only experienced, right, with salvation and relationship with Jesus, but then we also validate that experience. And then once that experience is validated, we help introduce them into a community of shared experience. So that part right there is where the Wounded Healers Program steps in and where a lot of rescue missions across the country sometimes have struggles. So our research shows that we've met with hundreds of missions to learn about their aftercare models, right? Summary is loose aftercare support is most likely the weakest, often, part of long-term success in recovery programs. Most people, like the guy says, at this point in their recovery program, everything kind of gets slack. How do we get past that? The same is true for the completion of a program, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, 3 months, 12 months. When they graduate and they transition out, right, that's when you see there's 2 periods in my experience where I see the most relapse, right, months 3 and 4, right, when they're coming out of some of the post-acute withdrawal, they're getting the most. You've experienced this, I've experienced this, right, when if you're working 12 steps or doing Celebrate Recovery or even the Genesis process, steps 3, 4, 5, right, especially 4 and 5, searching and fearless moral inventory and admitting to God, myself, and another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. Those are when I balk. That's when things kind of get hard, because after that you start working on character defects. The other time is when they've believe that they've completed a program, that they're pretty much finished, that the work is done, and then they go home. Or they go back into where is that transition from that bubble that he was talking about last night of safety into a community of shared experience that is not inside the mission, right? How do we do that? So some of the reasons that they don't make it is there's very little client incentive to participate, right? What is your encouragement? What is our encouragement to them to continue in their work, right? Because recovery is not easy, right? It's not complicated, but it's really difficult, right? So how do we encourage them to continue that, right? And then very little budget, right? Most rescue missions and most programs are focused on outputs, right? So what is the output of your program? It's somebody who's 365 days sober, right? 390 days sober isn't getting tracked. It's not getting counted, and it's not what the donors, sometimes the boards look at. It's what is the outcome? How many people a year finish this program, right? Well, what you're looking for is life transformation. What you're looking for is outcomes, right? Our program graduates, how long, right, do they continue on this path of discipleship? Do they continue to mature, as the doctor was talking about last night? Do they continue to mature into sanctification for the rest of their lives, right? So my personal journey, I went from like a target student and a target person to come into the residential recovery program, and because of the people in my life and the grace of the Lord leading me towards City Vision, that I was able to take the education that I learned. So Justin Place is a phenomenal program. We're great. Right now they use the Genesis process. They also do the 12 steps. They do Celebrate Recovery meetings a couple of times a week. So it's a year-long program, and by the time you finish it, if you do the internship, it's one more year, and by the time you finish the internship, you've got a peer sport specialist license, right? So it's a really good program, but that program still took me from where I was to as far as I could get in a year. Well, that's just a year. And they can't hold on to me forever. You know, even if I volunteer and willingly become staff, right? That's me choosing to also enter into a community of shared experience, but there's only so many staff positions, right? You can't hold on to everyone, and there's going to be people who are called to go home and be fathers and mothers and sons and daughters and all kinds of other things. All good work, right? All work is good. And then there's going to be people called into the ministry and to grow and grow. But everybody along the way has a calling, and City Vision fits into that with our Wounded Healer certificates, with a lot of our courses. So the big deal for me was, how do I now try and touch and continue that growth? Yes, sir.
My observation has been, this is how I'm describing it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a cultural change in our program. You've got 3 stages where they're in, like every day they have to go to devotions, every day they have to do this, every day that. Then they come into aftercare. What I'm observing is that with a number of them, they start going backwards at that time,
Mm-hmm.
because they no longer are in the regimented. Now we have a lot of success stories,
Mm-hmm.
but the point is, I'm seeing structurally a problem of, because I'm the go-to guy for aftercare. So that I'm seeing that some of them just drop out. They're in the building.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposedly going through the program, but they're disconnecting because they don't have to be going at this time. Have to go back to the devotions. They don't go through the normal steps that they did where everything is structured for them, as we talked about last night in the baby thing, where we are telling them what they do, and we're like basically holding their hand all the way through. Now their hand is like unlinked, and like, for example, scripture memory. They have to go through 3 things, scripture memory, to get out of it. But there's nothing at this time that I'm seeing. There are others who are just motivated.
Mm-hmm.
They're still in scripture. They're still going. They're just charging ahead. They're in a church. And then there's others who are just falling by the wayside. So I'm challenged by that as I'm in this seminar and the other seminars, that how do we keep those aftercare people still engaged in the process, because we know, of course, that when you get to that point of you're going to complete the program, then it's time to go out and get a job. Well, there's a disengagement with the norm structure. See, it's cultural. It's a cultural structure issue. And so that's where I feel challenged.
So, great point. And my experience, and maybe some of the others, if anyone here has more experience than me, that is, so what we try to do, and all of us, and so I'm going to go back to my director days and some of the programming days, is we want as many people to get as far along as we possibly can. I have to realize that in a discipleship model, some people hopefully will pass me as I'm walking alongside them. Some people may pass me, some people may make it as far as me, but there's always, everyone is at a different place. And once, because a program's a program. You can change your timelines if you choose to, but the way the program is today is the way that it's going to be. So the people that choose to disengage, right, I can make some internal program changes, I can pray, we can do a whole bunch of things and introduce more things, but we can't take that choice away. Right? One of the things in it's a completely different class, and I taught it not at City Vision, is when you come into a program like this is how much stress I can handle in a day, and it's mandatory. It's supposed to be in my life. So I come into a program, and the program gives me that. Over time, I get freedom. But if I don't add healthy things in that gap, then that demon's going to come back with 7 buddies. Right? So every time I progress, I have to, right, the Lord gives me the opportunity to add in what's good. And when I don't, I lose freedom, right? And I go bondage somewhere else. And so what you're talking about is the people that disengage, right? They've stepped out of that process of growth, right? And one of it's a long conversation because there's so many different domains and areas of growth, right? So I had this spiritual need for maturity, like he was talking about yesterday, but inside that spiritual need for maturity, I also need to mature, right, emotionally. I need to mature physically. I need to learn how to care for my body. I need to, one of the models he's talking about, so there's a Shepherd's House book that's in one of our curriculums called Living from the Heart that Jesus Gave You, right? And one of the main parts of going from infant to child to adult to parent is being able to care for self, and then being able to care for self and someone else in a mutually beneficial relationship. And then,
okay, that's a very good point. At what point can you say, in terms of the range of infant, child, teenager, adult, in terms of the models we're working with, does that happen?
so
That's because that's the point. Self-work, that's the thing.
So most of us, because I thought I'd kind of developed the class from that book, most of your residents are infants trying to become children, right? Even me at a year plus sober, because the tasks required to become a full-grown child are being able to care for self,
Right.
Being able to communicate, right, my needs that in an understandable manner, developing the persistence to do difficult things. These are all things that people in recovery I didn't have much experience in. Like, I was really smart, I was really capable, and I was really prideful, but I didn't do anything hard, right? I just kind of made it only the things that were simple. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're talking, a common language of struggling with these issues.
So some of the models that people have used, rescue missions have used across the nation. So St. Matthew's House, we have a loose alumni program. So eventually we had the budget to hire an alumni director. So she doesn't work, so it's not full-time, she doesn't have an office, but she also has a budget. So it's just her. So she gets to do alumni events. We have an alumni Facebook page. They go skydiving, they do camping, they do retreats. Now a lot of times the alumni have to foot the bill for that, but there's often donations and other things. But she keeps them together. We get donated kayaking trips. They do things, and there's 1,000 alumni, right, for the St. Matthew's House group. The Love Lady Center in Birmingham, right? They have these when they have these reunions. They do the East Lake Park. There's thousands of people there, and food trucks and bands. I mean, it's so some of those models are like that. Hope Gospel Mission. So they when they were doing their transitional part of the program, so the clients work, but part of their pay goes into a fund. And when they complete the program and move on, if they'll come to case management once a month, they get some of that money back for the next 2 years. So it's incentive because you're inside the program, so that goes in the fund regardless. If you're willing to come back to case management once a month, you get money for that. All right? So one of the things that we sometimes miss in a program, and I would tell this to the guys coming, so they'll be out in phase one for like 9 months, and then they would come back into transitional, and I would tell them, and this is part of what you're talking about. I would tell them, it doesn't really matter what you've done for the last 8 months, the Lord has blessed you. Right? Whether your heart's changed or not, it didn't matter. You were obedient, you didn't leave, there were seeds planted into you, the Lord has blessed you. Now it's time for you to decide whether you're going to engage and be grateful for that blessing and continue along. Because the gloves just kind of came off. You just went from all this structure and you had to stay on property, to now you have a part-time job, and now there's so-and-so right across the street. You've got to start exerting some self-control that the Lord has given you over this time. It's a difficult time. Now there's really good rules in that portion of the program, and most people finished, right? It's just 3 months and they could hold on. But at 3 months, when they graduate the program, they didn't have to leave. Right? They could stay in those transitional apartments up to another 2 years. Right? Now their rent goes up, but they're also now not having to take classes. They only do case management once a month, and they can get a full-time job. So rent going up was not really a big deal, especially compared to, I want to go do this on my own, and I want to start smoking cigarettes, and I'm going to get my own apartment. The bills go up. Right? There's a lot of different things in there. The transitional housing at Universtiy mission, right? It's a second part of their program. They can stay for another year. There's up to 100 people there. The apartments for our transitional housing in Naples. Now there's 2 or 3 guys, 2 in an apartment, so it's not so bad. But there's room for almost 100. Right? It's not, I think 88 or 98. Where am I at? Oh, there. So this is from City Vision, right? Our 5-year outcome vision. So what you want to see here is, right? So it says serve about 10% of program graduates. Department is a key strategy in transferring the lives. So this is me, right? This is me. This is the Wounded Healers program. My hope is that it's more than 10%. 10% hopefully is like an end result. But when you see some of the requirements, like you have to have a GED, but the Wounded Healer certificates, like if you're familiar with a university, so our associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree are all in addiction counseling, nonprofit management, ministry and leadership, and business administration. So we focus on the things that rescue missions do. So an associate's degree is 60 credit hours, and a bachelor's degree is 120. A certificate, so an addiction counseling certificate that would qualify you in the state of Alabama to become a peer support specialist, is accomplished in that 6 certificate. And that 6 certificate is 6 courses, right? And we offer 5 terms a year. So in 1 year and 1 term, just taking 1 class at a time, a student can become a peer specialist. Along the way in those certificate classes, they learn life skills. The Wounded Healers course, which we'll talk about, develops a recovery plan for the rest of your life. Vocation, following your purpose of work. We'll get there. I probably should wait till that slide to explain them all. Is it like a life plan? But there's financial peace, there's physical health, there's emotional stability. We offer courses in those along the way. So even if these students, if they've decided to engage, in that second year when they're not programmed, but they've chosen program, they get another year of foundational recovery at a higher, and this is no offense to any rescue mission in the country, right? All of our bachelor's level professors have master's degrees or higher. Every single one of them. And most of them work in the field. So it's taking what they learned at a program level. I went through a program. I know the people that taught me, right? And I ended up becoming one of those that taught them. But I never taught much before until I taught a lot with a bachelor's degree. Once I got a master's degree, I was a director. So I didn't get as much time in the classroom. So I know that the quality of the education excels. The bar raises up. Yes.
Here's an obvious question.
Mm-hmm.
Is the degrees that they get in your program transferable to the outside?
So we are an accredited distance education association. We are an accredited university, nationally accredited. So the difficult thing to understand is most state schools don't like anything from Christian universities. But our bachelor's degrees transfer anywhere. So I got my bachelor's degree from City Vision in addiction counseling, and it transferred, it didn't really matter about my MBA. My bachelor's degree transferred to Walden University. I'm finishing a master's in social work in August. So all of our bachelor's degrees, I don't think we've ever had one not transfer. If that answers your question. On the flip side, any of the students that come to us that have education, bring it, because we're very generous, and if there's something that we can give you credit for, we do. So if it's from an accredited university or accredited training school, we usually give you credit for it. So this is the me part, and then the capacity, right? So enable our partners more than double their total staff training hours. Staff and organization. So we did this at St. Matthew's House. When I started City Vision, there might have been 5 or 6 other members of staff, and they were all higher level than me as a case manager. They were all above me. I didn't know many of them that were students of City Vision. In the entire organization, at that time, probably a $17 million budget. In the entire organization, we have 1 certified addiction counselor. All right? So 4 years later, when I left and moved back to Alabama, we had 23 peer support specialists, and almost every director. We have 3 certified addiction professionals and 1 certified addiction counselor, all in programs. Right? So just that change in that shorter period of time, and then eventually St. Matthew's at that point was at a $30 million budget. So the money that was spent, and we'll get to part of that if I don't just keep procrastinating, and this is, we're not quite to that slide yet, the money that was spent was minimal. So part of what I do is the specialized courses and certificates that we talked about, and then the aftercare support. I have experience as a director, as a case manager, as a counselor. I'm about to test for my drug counselor license here in the state of Alabama. I'm testing for a licensed master social worker in the end of August. Is that aftercare support, that's the intense support as well as life and recovery courses, that aftercare support is me. So any of the students that come to us from rescue missions and partnerships, I become their advisor, their academic kind of consultant, and also in relation that we communicate. So once a term, I'll usually reach out to the partner and be like, hey, can we get together for half an hour and talk about the students and see how they're doing, what support we can give them. I also, another part of what we were talking about last night is in that maturity step. You were talking about it in your questions. How do we get them to engage? A lot of people say like, yep, I'd love to take courses, I'm called to do this, and 6 weeks in or 3 weeks in, they're like, I'm not doing this, right? We don't, that developing the perseverance to do difficult things is still new to us. Like I can do really hard stuff inside a program when you're going to force me to do it, and the judge told me if I didn't complete this program, I was going back to jail, right? But when I've made a decision to go to school afterwards, it's still hard, right? Those first emotional, remember, I'm used to rejection. I'm used to fear. I'm used to people saying I'm not good enough. Those are the lies I'm used to hearing. So I start a course that seems difficult to me, or I start doing the Wounded Healers course, and the coursework is like, man, this is serious stuff. I've got to go back and deal with my past, so I just want to quit. Well, that's what I'm for. Encourage them through those past, or those first few obstacles. Right? If you just started playing basketball tomorrow and you made your first 10 shots, you probably never quit playing basketball. But if you went on the basketball court, people started making fun of you, you'd probably never play basketball again. My responsibility is to make sure they make their first 10 goals and to encourage them along the way. Because once we have a habit of winning, we continue to win. Like that's what the Bible wants us to do. That's what the Lord wants us to do. But we're so used to losing as addicts and people in recovery that when it gets hard, we already expect to lose. So we just complete the cycle. Might as well get it over with and start over. Right? I'll just quit here. I'll move to Southwest Florida and start again. I'll just quit here. And I'll go over back to Atlanta and I'll start again. That's what we do. So that aftercare support is what I do as someone who's experienced and is aware of it to help them through those processes. And the financial support. So more than 90% of our wounded healers, so the people coming out of your programs, qualify for Pell Grants. They qualify for Pell Grants.
Okay.
So if you make less than $50,000 a year and you don't have a bachelor's degree, you're going to qualify for a Pell Grant. If you get the full Pell Grant, right, and you're a partner that sends 2 or more students in a year, right, and you get a $250 scholarship, your tuition plus the technology fee, right, you're going to get $324 back from the government for every course that you take. Right, that's not money that City Vision keeps. We're a nonprofit. That's not what we do. But so it's almost a complement to a part-time job. So if they have, and this is It's not on the next slide. Dr. Sherry just sent this in this slide. The difference is, or the difficult part of this, and it might be in a different slide, is we have 5 terms a year. They're 8 weeks long. So in an 8-week class, you're getting semester credit. So that means you're doing twice as much work. Like a normal semester is 15 to 17 weeks. So you're doing twice as much work in that amount of time. So it takes 15 to 17 hours a week of work to do your homework. So it's not about capacity. We rarely have students who can't pass the courses, right? And one of the things about City Vision is we're application-based. So if you take a class with us, you're going to be able to take it out of the classroom the week you've done it and apply it to life. You're not going to take math. You're not going to take history. You're not going to take physics or chemistry. We don't teach those things. We teach life skills and recovery and business administration. So the typical, so this was us, 2024. So I had 162 wounded healers from 57 ministry partners. The graduation rate, right, so 54% might not seem great, but that's for students who finish one class. If you finish one class, you got a better than 50% chance of finishing your degree. That's pretty good. 94% employment rate for graduates. Those are some things that you can look at. But this is our normal. I kind of base it, the William White stuff I was talking about earlier is from a transformational change. I'll slow down. I caught myself that time. So the transformational change is about
Self-help.
self-help. Yeah, becoming aware of capturing a couple of thoughts, even though they're 90 miles an hour. Is individuals experiencing addiction, homelessness, and are imprisonment. So I'm in a period of isolation and discontent, right? They need a partner in residential recovery or a reentry program. So I'm introduced to a message or a messenger of hope, right? And then, right, that experience gets validated along the way. Like I end up with a relationship with Jesus, and not only do I want to change because things hurt, but now I want to change because I want to change. Right? For me and for the Lord, I want to change now because I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father. I want to be a better son. I want to be a better brother. Right? And at some point along that, I realized, man, I was really focused on me, and now I'm really focused on my family, and now I can focus on others. Right? Even outside my family. That's what the Lord calls us to do. Is remember, when it says to the ends of the earth, He's like Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. Personal, family. Every time the circle increases, as long as I stay humble. And I follow the Lord. So validation of the experience, and then an introduction to a community of shared experience. So that percentage of students that would come to us from you, right, are the ones that like, I feel called to do this. I just need support along the way. You're James or Eason, you want support along the way, right? Because you're going to enter into a community of people that are like you. I want to learn more about recovery. I want to serve my ministry better. These are the things that I want to do. Because anybody know stages of change too? Right? So pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation. When people are in preparation, which is right before action, is they've decided they want to change and they want to get better. They have no idea how. That's why we have rescue missions. That's why we have what we do, is because you know how. You know how, you know how, you know how. But that's what we're called to do, is to take the people that don't know how and to walk alongside them out. And that's the problem, is there's so many people, and this is sometimes where your question